Amber and Lila Harris were the kind of sisters everyone envied. Beautiful, wealthy, inseparable, until a single drunken night at an airport turned them from social media darlings into the most infamous criminals of the year. Amber Harris adjusted her sunglasses as she stepped out of the rideshare, her suitcase wheels rattling across the pavement toward the bright glass doors of Austin Bergstrom International Airport. Her younger sister, Lila, trailed behind, humming to herself and sipping an iced coffee that was more vodka than caffeine. It was supposed to be a sister's getaway, just sun, drinks, and peace after a rough year. Amber needed it more than anyone. She'd lost her job 3 weeks ago, but hadn't told Lila yet. She wanted to pretend, at least for a few days, that everything was fine. Lila, on the other hand, was living in her own version of chaos. Her beauty business was struggling, investors were demanding answers, and she had maxed out her credit cards trying to maintain her perfect image online. The Miami trip was a chance to reset, to post smiling pictures on social media, and convince everyone that the Harris sisters were thriving. They had always done everything together: school dances, family vacations, and now, apparently, public disasters waiting to happen. As they passed through security, Amber's phone buzzed with messages from her former boss, ignored calls, warnings, and one last, "We need to talk." She silenced it quickly. Lila noticed, but didn't ask. She was too busy flirting with the TSA agent who checked their IDs. The sisters laughed their way through the terminal, stopping at a duty-free shop to grab expensive perfume and another drink. Everything seemed lighthearted, playful, and harmless. But beneath the surface, tension was growing. Amber's fake calmness and Lila's reckless optimism were about to collide. Neither knew that this trip wouldn't just ruin their vacation plans. It would destroy the lives they were so desperately pretending to control. The airport bar was already half full when the sisters arrived. Lila led the way, tossing her hair back as if she were walking into a party instead of a terminal. She ordered tequila shots before Amber could even glance at the menu. Amber hesitated, then gave in. The first sip burned, but it dulled the noise in her head. The worry about bills, the shame of being fired, the fear that someone from her office might recognize her. For a few moments, she felt almost free. Lila was in her element. She chatted loudly with strangers, laughed at her own jokes, and clinked glasses with anyone who looked her way. People noticed her energy, bright, wild, and a little dangerous. Amber tried to keep up, though she was far more reserved. When Lila ordered another round, Amber didn't stop her. Soon, laughter turned into shouting, and the sisters began drawing attention from nearby passengers trying to relax before their flights. A gate agent announced a 2-hour delay over the speakers, and groans filled the bar. Lila rolled her eyes dramatically and ordered champagne, declaring that they would make the best of it. Amber tried to calm her down, but Lila brushed her off. She started playing music from her phone, dancing near their table, and snapping selfies. Amber joined for a few pictures, forcing smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. What started as harmless fun began to turn sour. A spilled drink, a broken glass, a sharp comment from another passenger. Small sparks of conflict began to appear. The bar staff whispered about calling security, but no one acted yet. The tension was rising quietly, and no one realized they were witnessing the start of a meltdown that would soon go viral. By the time their flight was finally called, the sisters had crossed the line between tipsy and out of control. Amber's walk was uneven, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor as she dragged her suitcase toward the gate. Lila trailed behind, laughing too loudly and waving at strangers like she was greeting fans. Other passengers stepped aside, uncomfortable but curious. The sisters looked glamorous from afar, but up close, they were chaos, perfume mixed with the sharp smell of alcohol and frustration. At the gate, the airline staff tried to maintain their patience. Amber slurred her words while demanding to take her half-finished drink on board. The attendant explained the rule politely, but Amber wasn't listening. Her temper flared as she accused the woman of being rude. Lila joined in, spinning around and shouting that they were being treated like criminals. A nearby child began to cry as the sisters' voices grew louder. Phones started recording. Amber's purse slipped off her shoulder and spilled onto the floor. Makeup, receipts, and a small bottle of gin clattered onto the tiles. Lila bent down to help, but ended up knocking over a stroller in the process. The mother gasped. Someone yelled for security. The scene had shifted from embarrassing to alarming. As airport staff tried to intervene, Amber stumbled backward into a metal post, setting off a chain reaction of dropped luggage and startled travelers. People began backing away. The crowd buzzed with a mix of shock and fascination. Within minutes, uniformed officers were on their way. What had started as a delayed flight was turning into something much bigger, a public meltdown that no one present would ever forget. The moment security arrived, the situation escalated beyond control. Two guards approached carefully, their expressions calm but firm, while the crowd formed a loose circle around the sisters. Amber stood rigid, her face flushed, eyes wild with defiance. Lila swayed beside her, giggling nervously as if the whole thing were a prank. When one guard gently asked them to step aside, Lila refused, saying she hadn't done anything wrong. Amber crossed her arms tightly and demanded to speak to a manager, her words slurred but loud enough to echo through the terminal. Passengers pulled out their phones, capturing every second. A man in a business suit whispered that the sisters were celebrities, though no one recognized them. When the guards tried to guide Amber away from the gate, she jerked free, her suitcase tipping over and scattering clothes across the floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd as a perfume bottle shattered, spreading a heavy floral scent into the air. Lila panicked and tried to grab Amber's arm, but ended up stumbling into one of the officers. That single misstep turned the moment explosive. The guard steadied her, but Amber shouted for him to get his hands off her sister. She flung her purse toward him, the strap striking his shoulder before hitting the ground. Alarms sounded as backup officers rushed in. Travelers hurried away while announcements blared over the intercom, trying to restore order. The sisters were surrounded now, faces red, mascara streaking, hair tangled. Lila began to cry, and Amber's voice broke as she screamed her innocence. Within minutes, both women were handcuffed, their wrists pressed cold against the tiled floor. The last thing Amber saw before being led away was a sea of flashing cameras capturing her downfall. By dawn the next morning, the chaos at the Austin airport had become international news. Clips of the sisters screaming, stumbling, and being restrained by officers flooded every social platform. The video, less than 2 minutes long, had been shared thousands of times within hours. Headlines called them the out-of-control sisters, and hashtags multiplied faster than they could be deleted. Strangers debated whether to pity or condemn them. Some found the footage funny. Others saw it as a tragic display of public humiliation. Amber woke up in a holding cell, her head pounding, her clothes wrinkled, and her dignity shattered. Lila was in a separate cell nearby, crying quietly. Neither of them remembered everything that happened. Outside, news vans gathered near the police station. Reporters repeated the same phrases: drunken meltdown, airport disturbance, 2 women in custody. Their faces were plastered on TV screens and gossip sites, their social media accounts frozen under the flood of comments and mockery. Old acquaintances started sharing stories, claiming they had always known the sisters were trouble. Family friends called the Harris parents for statements, but the family refused to speak publicly. Amber's former employer released a vague message about distancing from inappropriate behavior. Lila's brand sponsors pulled out within hours. What had started as a night of drinking had turned into global humiliation. Yet behind the flashing headlines and online laughter, something darker lingered. The airport incident wasn't just a viral scandal. It was a symptom of something deeper, something that had been building between the sisters long before their names became trending hashtags. The meltdown had made them famous, but the real story was only beginning to unravel. In the days following their arrest, reporters dug deeper, eager to uncover the story behind the sisters' spectacular downfall. What began as curiosity soon turned into a scandal that reached far beyond a drunken airport scene. Financial records began to surface. Amber's firing from her finance firm was not for downsizing, as she had told everyone. She had been quietly investigated for embezzling company funds, small amounts at first, then larger transfers hidden through fake accounts. The firm had been preparing to press charges before her disappearance. Lila's situation wasn't much better. Her beauty brand, once praised online, was under review by investors who claimed she'd misled them about sales numbers and product costs. The glamorous influencer image she maintained had been a facade built on borrowed money and deceit. The Miami trip was never about relaxation. It was an escape plan. The sisters had planned to leave before Amber's financial crimes surfaced publicly, using Lila's company account to cover their expenses. Investigators pieced it together quickly. Surveillance footage showed Amber and Lila arguing in the airport parking lot before entering the terminal, their suitcases overstuffed and their tempers already high. Bank statements revealed last-minute withdrawals and frantic money transfers the night before their flight. As the story broke, public opinion shifted from amusement to outrage. What once looked like a drunken meltdown was now viewed as the desperate unraveling of two women trying to flee the consequences of their own lies. Every secret that had been carefully hidden behind filters and smiles was dragged into the light. Their perfect sister act had shattered, and the world was watching every crack form in real time. Inside the gray walls of the police station, the sisters sat in separate rooms, each under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights. Amber kept her arms folded tightly, her eyes red but dry. Lila was trembling, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The interrogations began slowly. Detectives wanted to know why two women with spotless public images had caused such chaos, and why they had been trying to leave the country so suddenly. Amber tried to control the narrative at first, insisting it was all a misunderstanding fueled by alcohol and exhaustion. But the detectives already knew more than she realized. When they showed her the financial records, Amber's calm started to crumble. The questions grew sharper, the evidence undeniable. After hours of silence, she finally broke. She admitted she had taken company money, insisting she meant to pay it back. She said the trip was meant to clear her head before facing the consequences. Lila, however, told a different story. She denied any involvement in Amber's crimes and claimed she had no idea about the stolen money. She said she had only agreed to the vacation because her sister needed a break. Detectives compared their statements and saw the divide. The sisters' once unbreakable bond was cracking under pressure. Surveillance footage showed them arguing repeatedly that morning, their tension visible long before security intervened. By evening, prosecutors had enough evidence to build a full case. Both women were charged, Amber with embezzlement and public disturbance, Lila with fraud and obstruction. Their mugshots, released to the press, told a story no words could. Two sisters who had fallen from luxury to disgrace, each beginning to realize the other might not be worth protecting anymore. The courtroom buzzed with reporters, flashing cameras, and murmuring spectators when the Harris sisters made their first appearance. Amber entered first, wearing a plain gray suit that did little to hide her exhaustion. Lila followed, dressed more stylishly but looking equally tense. The judge's gavel silenced the room as the proceedings began. Their lawyers tried to paint the sisters as victims of stress and poor judgment, claiming the airport meltdown had been a result of anxiety, not guilt. But the prosecution came prepared with evidence that told a much darker story. Bank records, company emails, and witness statements painted a clear picture of Amber's embezzlement scheme. She had been siphoning funds for months, using her position at the firm to cover her tracks. Lila's defense quickly unraveled too when investor complaints and forged invoices from her beauty brand were presented. The prosecution argued that the sisters had been planning to flee before authorities could act, and their behavior at the airport was simply the breaking point of a long pattern of deception. Journalists filled the courtroom gallery, scribbling notes as the sisters sat silently beside their attorneys. Each revelation deepened the tension between them. At times, they refused to look at each other. Amber seemed resigned, while Lila's anger simmered beneath her carefully painted expression. When the judge announced that both would face multiple felony counts, the crowd gasped. The trial became a media sensation, dissected on talk shows and podcasts. Their story was no longer about a drunken outburst. It was about betrayal, greed, and the collapse of a carefully crafted image. The sisters who once shared everything were now fighting for their freedom, and neither seemed willing to take the fall alone. As the trial dragged on, the Harris family began to unravel under the weight of public humiliation. Their parents, once proud of their daughter's success, stopped attending court. They avoided reporters and refused to answer calls. The sisters' friends slowly disappeared too, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Invitations stopped coming, business partners withdrew, and the glamorous life the sisters had flaunted online vanished overnight. Amber spent her nights in the small rented apartment of her attorney's assistant, hiding from cameras parked outside her former home. Lila tried to maintain her social media presence, but every post was flooded with hateful comments. She attempted to defend herself, blaming the media for exaggerating, but it only fueled more outrage. The world was no longer fascinated by them. It was entertained by their destruction. Family sources revealed to journalists that the sisters were no longer speaking. Lila believed Amber had dragged her into a mess she didn't create, while Amber accused Lila of pretending to be innocent. Their bond, once celebrated for its closeness, had become a battlefield of bitterness. They communicated only through their lawyers, each trying to protect themselves from the other's downfall. Meanwhile, documentarians and gossip channels competed to tell their story first. Offers poured in for exclusive interviews, and Lila secretly negotiated with a producer for a documentary about her side of the events. Amber, exhausted and remorseful, refused all publicity. She wanted to disappear. The world that once adored them had moved on, leaving them isolated and resentful. Behind the fame, the followers, and the filters, there was nothing left. Just two sisters who had destroyed each other in front of millions, their loyalty replaced by silence and regret. Months after the sentencing, the internet's obsession with the Harris sisters began to fade, but their story was far from over. Amber was serving her 5-year sentence at a state correctional facility, keeping to herself and avoiding the spotlight she once couldn't escape. Lila, cleared of the major charges, was released but lived under constant public scrutiny. Her name, though technically free, had become a punchline. No company wanted to hire her. No brand wanted to collaborate. The glamour of her former life had evaporated, replaced by shame and endless attempts to rebuild a ruined reputation. Then, one evening, a new video surfaced online. A security guard from Amber's old office leaked archived footage showing her transferring cash envelopes into her handbag after hours. Proof she had been acting alone. Investigators re-examined the files and confirmed that Lila's name had been added to the accounts after the thefts began, not before. The truth was devastating. Lila had been framed in part by circumstance, in part by her sister's desperation. When confronted in prison, Amber confessed through tears. She admitted she had used Lila as cover, knowing her sister's chaotic behavior would draw attention away from her own crimes. She claimed she had never meant for things to go that far. Lila's charges were formally dropped, but public opinion didn't shift easily. Amber remained behind bars, haunted by guilt. Lila disappeared from the public eye, moving to a quiet coastal town where no one recognized her name. What had begun as a glamorous vacation had ended as a cautionary tale. The sisters had tried to escape their mistakes, but in the end, their downfall became the lesson that lies can only be hidden until the truth finds its way to the surface.